China has identified the cause of the
mysterious new virus.
Coronavirus.
There are fears a rapidly spreading virus has reached Australia.
This is a rapidly emerging situation.
Where there are cases, the government can quickly implement targeted measures and focus control efforts where they're needed most.
Together in collaboration with the pharmaceutical companies.
We need vaccines to immunize ourselves.
And then the final solution, which is a year to 2 years off, is the vaccine.
The answer to that is to really close things down.
Hello again, and welcome back to The Abstract. I am your host, Peter Kirby, author of the book Chemtrails Exposed, A New Manhattan Project, and staff writer at Activist Post. This week, for Abstract Episode 32, we're going to answer the question, why coal fly ash? In other words, if you told somebody that we're being sprayed with coal fly ash, their immediate reaction might be, why coal fly ash? And this is the most obvious question after last week's video. Last week's video scientifically proved that we are being sprayed. So then the next question is, what are they spraying? You know, such as Michael Murphy's 2010 movie, What in the World Are They Spraying? And the answer to that is coal fly ash. This has been determined scientifically by Dr. Marvin Herndon, PhD, and his peer reviewers. But even beyond that, there's a whole mountain of circumstantial evidence supporting the idea that we are being sprayed with coal fly ash. And we're going to get into all of it today here, so let's get started. Many of you, like me, the first time I heard about this substance, coal fly ash, may be asking, what is coal fly ash? Well, coal fly ash is the smoke that rises from burning coal. It is a toxic waste byproduct of the electrical power industry. Coal is one of the main hydrocarbon fuels that they use to power electricity plants. They use gas and oil as well, gasoline and oil as well, but they also use a lot of coal to this day. And so here in America and in the rest of the Western world, this coal fly ash is produced by the megaton. This vast amount of coal fly ash is produced by intercepting it before it leaves the smokestacks of the coal-fired energy plant. It is intercepted by electrostatic precipitators, and these power producers should dispose of the coal fly ash appropriately because it has a lot of nasty stuff in it, such as many different metals, including mercury. It has arsenic in it, and a whole panoply of radioactive elements. The scientific evidence supporting this assertion has been provided to us by Dr. Marvin Herndon, PhD. He started publishing papers about this back in 2015, but his first peer-reviewed papers identifying coal fly ash as the most common chemtrail spray began in 2017. He had 4 2017 peer-reviewed articles asserting the coal fly ash hypothesis, all published in the Journal of Geography, Environment, and Earth Science International. He also followed up in 2018 with another 3 peer-reviewed papers asserting coal fly ash as the most common chemtrail spray. So then the next question becomes, who is this Dr. Herndon? That's what I thought to myself the first time I saw him asserting this hypothesis many years ago. And he has impeccable credentials. He earned his PhD in nuclear chemistry in 1974 from Texas A&M. He's worked with famous scientists such as Hans Suess, I think is how you pronounce it. Hans, it's S-U-E-S-S. Might be Seuss, like Dr. Seuss, but I think you pronounce it Suisse, Hans Suisse. And Manhattan Project physical chemist Harold Urey. And both of those guys were, in turn, trained by master scientists such as Niels Bohr. Now, if you know science history, you know that Niels Bohr is one of the most revered scientists in all of history. He was kind of like von Neumann in that he was just so super smart that all the other scientists just basically bowed to him. Dr. Herndon has had scientific papers published in the most prestigious journals, including the Proceedings of the Royal Society of London and the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. He's been profiled in the popular press worldwide for decades now, including a Discover magazine cover story. And just in general, Dr. Herndon, he's a well-known and respected, civically active citizen. More recently, Herndon has given us a book along with his co-author, Dr. Mark Whiteside. It's called Chemtrails Are Not Contrails, The Face of Evil. And I encourage you to go to Amazon and buy and read that book. And in that book, he provided more evidence for the coal fly ash hypothesis using mass spectroscopy, which is a process that analyzes the molecules and elements inside of whatever substance it is that you want to analyze. But Dr. Herndon analyzed snow samples in this case. In the previous papers, he had been analyzing rainwater and ambient air samples as well. But in his book, Chemtrails Are Not Contrails, he writes of snow samples analyzed by mass spectroscopy. And guess what he found? The chemical signature of coal fly ash. It was present in all of the environmental samples tested. And that is because you will not find a substance such as coal fly ash identified with all the nasty stuff in it. You won't find something like that everywhere. You won't find that in every environmental sample that you take unless it's being sprayed from aircraft. That's the only way to saturate the atmosphere, saturate the lower troposphere in such a manner to get those little particles into everything. And this is not to say that coal fly ash is the only thing that we're being sprayed with. There's been credible mentions of such things as black goo and other strange substances sprayed from aircraft. Some of these things appear in William Thomas's book, Chemtrails Confirmed. That's another one if you haven't read it. That one came out in 2004. It was the only chemtrail book on the market that I was aware of when I first published my ebook version of Chemtrails Exposed back in like 2010, 2012, whatever it was. But this coal fly ash also may be used as a substrate for other substances. They may just put stuff on the coal fly ash. But when you're talking about stuff like this, what you're getting at basically is that they might be putting bioweapons in the chemtrail spray. And that would be expensive because bioweapons are generally expensive. So the argument for coal fly ash is stronger because coal fly ash is inexpensive. We have an inexpensive, readily available, and seemingly inexhaustible supply of this stuff. And so now we're getting into the circumstantial evidence for why it is asserted that we are being sprayed with coal fly ash. An undeniable case is made in my book, Chemtrails Exposed, a New Manhattan Project, that this project is mainly about weather modification. I have a chapter on other agendas, but the preponderance of the evidence indicates that the reason we are being sprayed is mainly about weather modification. So when you start putting weather modification together with coal fly ash, you find a lot. Many people in the military historically have claimed that the smoke from exploded bombs causes precipitation. The famous early American meteorologist James Pollard the Storm King Espy claimed that the smoke from forest fires causes rain to fall. The founders of today's conventional weather modification industry, otherwise known as cloud seeding, Irving Langmuir and Bernard Vonnegut worked with fine particle oil smokes during World War II. The conventional weather modification industry nucleant discovered by Vonnegut is the smoke of burning silver iodide. In all of these instances, as with coal fly ash, smoke from some type of fire is either said to cause or is known to cause weather modification. Along these same lines, today's geoengineers continuously talk about how volcanic ash spewing from a fiery volcano can reflect sunlight back into space and therefore cool the planet, saving us from the dreaded global warming. This is the SRM geoengineering thesis. In light of this, it is interesting to note that in 1963, weather modifier Narian R. Gokhale of the Department of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences of the State University of New York experimented with volcanic ash as a nucleant. And many of the things that geoengineers say that they want to spray us with are in coal fly ash, like silica, sulfates, and aluminum. Today's coal-fired power plants produce coal fly ash in the correct particle size for optimum nucleation. It's been determined you need the particles to be a certain size for the most atmospheric water to glom onto it, and this size of particle has been determined as 1/10 of a micron. In order to produce coal fly ash in the size range, the particle size range of 1/10 of a micron, all you have to do is finely pulverize the coal before you fire it, and this is a standard industry practice. The different molecules found in coal fly ash can serve different purposes in the New Manhattan Project. There's quite a bit of aluminum oxide in coal fly ash, and this has been used extensively in the history of weather modification as a nucleant. Silicon is another substance that has been used extensively in weather modification that presents abundantly in coal fly ash as well. Then the aforementioned radioactive elements found in coal fly ash can be used as atmospheric tracers. Most famously, we have barium and strontium, but Dr. Herndon has actually identified, I think, a total of 13 or 14 radioactive elements in coal fly ash. But there's historical record of weather modifiers using radioactive particles to track the movements of storms and air masses. I find it interesting that the National Institute of Standards and Technology, otherwise known as NIST, the people who covered up 9/11, they sell coal fly ash as one of their standard reference materials, or SRMs, and they've been doing this for decades. I find this interesting because it would be advantageous to the technological development and ongoing operations of the New Manhattan Project to standardize the substance being sprayed. The evidence here just goes on and on. There's an entire field known as coal fly ash utilization, and during the first International Coal Fly Ash Utilization Symposium, and as well as in Dr. Marvin Herndon's work, it is mentioned that the iron oxide in the fly ash makes the ash a brownish color. And I've observed this, and I think you can too. If you look up in the sky on a day where you've been sprayed, you'll notice, especially if there's clouds in the background, you'll notice that the cloud cover has a brownish tint to it. It's very slight, but you can see it if you look for it. And then the analogy to water fluoridation should not be overlooked here. As most of you know, what your local water district calls fluoride and just puts in your water without really telling you what it is, it's an industrial waste byproduct of the phosphate mining industry, usually, called hydrofluosilicic acid. And, like coal fly ash, if the population was not forced to ingest it, it would be expensive to get rid of because it's highly toxic. But what we have instead are corrupt governments paying for it to be consumed by the unsuspecting public, and a giant disinformation apparatus constantly telling us that anyone opposed to these practices is a crazy conspiracy theorist. Does that sound familiar? And then here's another very interesting analog. The functioning of an electrostatic precipitator, the things that they use to sequester the coal fly ash at the coal-fired power plant, the functioning of that machine is germane to the New Manhattan Project itself. When an electrostatic precipitator collects coal fly ash, a mini New Manhattan Project occurs. You see, the coal fly ash particles racing out of the exhaust system of a coal-fired power plant are first charged mid-air, and then there are plates that have an opposite charge, and these particles, since they're oppositely charged, they're attracted to these plates, and so they go collect on these plates, and then once they get on the plates, they are taken away. This is analogous to how the atmospheric particles of today's New Manhattan Project are charged or ionized and then manipulated. In fact, there's a whole field of study going back many decades about just that, the electrical manipulation of atmospheric particles. I have the whole history of it in my book, Chemtrails Exposed, a New Manhattan Project. And then, rounding out this week's episode, we have Dresser Industries and the Bush family. The world's largest manufacturer of electrostatic precipitators is known as Dresser Industries. And through the Bush political crime family's family bank, known as Brown Brothers Harriman, the Bush family owns Dresser Industries, and they have done so for a long time. Dresser Industries in itself has nasty connections with the Nazis, and the Bush family is connected to all kinds of nasty organizations with extensive ties to the New Manhattan Project, such as the Nazis as well, the original Manhattan Project, the CIA, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Carlyle Group, Enron, and more. I have a whole section on the Bush family's involvement, potential involvement, with the New Manhattan Project in one of the final chapters of the book, The Power Behind the Chemtrails. So we will finish here today with an interesting question. Is Dresser Industries providing the coal fly ash needed for today's New Manhattan Project? Just asking. See you next week.